Hello, everyone, and thanks for coming today. My name is Brian Bishop, and I work for Microsoft in the SharePoint Readiness arena. And part of my responsibility is creating documentation for SharePoint and some internal training for some of our engineers. Rory?
Thanks, Brian. My name is Rory Leonards, and I also work in the SharePoint Online readiness space, primarily around documenting issues, so KB articles, as well as support readiness.
Great. Well, thanks again for joining us today. We're going to be talking about troubleshooting SharePoint Online documents and lists. Again, a reminder that we are being recorded, and if you'd prefer not to be captured, avoid typing or leaving the meeting. Again, this presentation will be available at YouTube after the show is done a little bit later, and we will be addressing some questions through a link toward the end. To map out what we're going to be talking about today, primarily we're going to address many of those issues that are most common to some of our clientele out there working with SharePoint Online. Let me give you an idea of what's coming up. First of all, we have a list of simple controls that show up at the top of a list of your Word documents, your Excel items that are inside of a SharePoint list. And sometimes those easy controls like new, sync, edit, they disappear. And you might be wondering where they went, so we'll talk about how to get those back. Maybe you've enabled a feature in SharePoint limited access user permissions lockdown mode, and now some people that were you expected to get to a particular item are no longer able to do so. We'll talk about how to address that issue. Maybe you've seen access denied, or sorry, you don't have access to this page. There are many things that can cause that. We'll address at least a few of the most prominent ones. There is upon the ribbon a quick edit button, and sometimes that's not enabled as expected. How can we turn that back on? Or maybe you're working with video files such as MOV or MP4s, and you're getting this messaging saying Windows Media Player cannot connect to the server. How do we address that issue? Something that is new to Office 365, hopefully you've had a chance to play with that, is video. And now that for those of you who have played around with that a bit and created channels and uploaded videos, you're concerned that after you created that channel, you couldn't find it on the channels page. Where did that go, and when do you expect to see that again? We'll also talk about an ongoing issue or concerns that some people have with opening with Explorer, or how to configure and troubleshoot map network drives with SharePoint Online, the types of files that you can't add to a list or library. Maybe a user without permissions to SharePoint Online resources don't have the option to request that access. No Excel survey option when you click new, and sorry, your session has expired error messaging when you try to open a document from SharePoint Online. First one we'll talk about, simple controls are missing for a document library. There's what the simple controls look like. At the top of your SharePoint list, you have some quick commands: new, upload, sync, edit, manage, and share. When you browse to your SharePoint Online document library and you're expecting to see those, you find that they are missing. They're simply not available. Well, the primary reason for that is what the view is being based on. If you have a view that is based on the default style, you should be able to see those quick commands, those simple controls. But if you're using another style other than default, that's where those go away. So let's take, for example, a new document library that we work with. We create that document library. We have our standard view, and we have our default view style showing up. So I do see my Word documents, my Excel, my OneNote notebook, but I do see my new upload, sync, and so forth in that simple controls bar. If I want to modify that view and add a column or change the sort order, etc., as long as I'm still basing my view style on the standard view, I'm still okay and I can see those controls just fine. If you haven't seen that dialog, if I'm going to modify or create a new view, that's what that dialog looks like, and default is at the bottom. As long as you're choosing that, simple controls are going to be available to you. So if you have seen those disappear, the workaround to fix this issue is to go back and apply that default style within the view of the affected library. We have some more documentation on this to help you out. If you go to support.microsoft.com, the KB number is 2971146, and this issue is entitled, "The Simple Controls Are Missing for a SharePoint Online Document Library." Maybe you are still wondering about how can I create new views. Is that something that would be helpful so that I can find my information and items a little bit quicker? For more information about working with or changing, deleting, creating views of a list or library, we do have documentation there out at our office.microsoft.com site. Next issue we'll talk about, we don't necessarily have a KB for this. It's a common issue, and it is by design. You have a feature enabled in your SharePoint site, limited access user permission lockdown mode. What problem does that create? Well, when this is enabled, permissions for users with limited access permissions, such as anonymous users, are reduced, preventing access to application pages, including item properties or list views. If a document folder or library has unique permissions, those users aren't going to be able to do the following. They can't use the drag and drop feature to upload documents. They won't be able to browse to the affected folder, use the standard with or shared with feature, open documents in the Office client, and some call-out features on documents and folders will not render as expected either. So how do you work around this issue? Well, you just need to be aware that if that limited access user permission lockdown mode is activated, those are some of the symptoms that you might expect to see. How do you get to that? If you haven't played with this before, you go to your settings gear up on the top of your page inside of Internet Explorer or your whatever browser you're using. Go to Site Settings, Site Collection Administration, and Site Collection Features. And among those listed, you'll find Limited Access User Permission Lockdown Mode. To zoom in a little bit more, again, to give you an idea of what that functionality does, when this feature is enabled, permissions for users in the limited access permission level, like those anonymous users, are reduced, and that does prevent access. For more information about enabling or disabling this and other site collection features, we have content out there by the name of Enable or Disable Site Collection Features, and that will walk you through not only how to enable or disable, but give you a better description about what each of those features does. The dreaded access denied, some of you have seen that before. Here is a very common scenario for when you might see that and what caused that. You see an access denied, or sorry, you don't have access to this page error when accessing a share folder in SharePoint Online. So you have a SharePoint Online site that's using the team site template. In the team site, you have a document library. The versioning settings option under the library settings are configured as follows. And this is what's causing that issue. The content approval is set to yes. Document version history is set to create major and minor draft versions. The SharePoint Server Publishing Infrastructure feature is set to active for the affected site collection. And you might see a user is granted permission to access a folder in the library. So when the user browses to the folder that they were granted access to, they receive one of the following error messages and then can't access the folder. Access denied, or sorry, you really don't have access to this. So how do you get around that? You just need to change some of that configuration. Either grant access to the whole document library instead of just to the folder, or use a different document library instead of a folder entirely. You can also set content approval to no, or configure document version history as anything else other than the create major and minor draft versions. And that should help you to avoid that denied message. If you haven't been for a little while to the list properties, if you go there and look for version settings, here are some of those configurations that you'll be looking for. Content approval, make it no, or document version history, choose something else, either no versioning at all or create major versions instead. And by the way, that is designed behavior. That is something that we would expect. And just remember also that publishing sites require users to access the site via the open permission level. For more information about getting around that access denied, we have a KB at support.microsoft.com 3016644 entitled Access Denied or Sorry, you don't have access to this page error when users are trying to access a shared folder in SPO. You're wondering why your Quick Edit Ribbon button is disabled. The scenario. When you rest the mouse pointer over the Quick Edit button in Microsoft SharePoint Online, you receive the following message. This control is currently disabled. What's the workaround for that? User create a view that uses the default view list style. That's something we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, where you're working with views. Choose default. On the affected list, click the Library tab on the ribbon and then click Modify View to get to that. And in the Style section, click Default and then click OK. And that should enable your Quick Edit button one more time. Information is available at our KB number 2876824, entitled Quick Edit button on the SharePoint Online ribbon isn't enabled for a specific list view. Next issue, very common. Windows Media Player can't connect to the server error messaging. What's the scenario for that one? You uploaded an MOV or an MP4 video to a SharePoint Online library, and in Internet Explorer you browsed to that SharePoint Online library with that MOV or MP4 video and attempted to open it. When you clicked the video to view it in Windows Media Player, you receive the following error message. Windows Media Player cannot connect to the server. The server name might not be correct, the server might not be available, or your proxy settings might not be correct. How do you get around that one? A couple of steps to take. First, when you sign in to Office 365 and SharePoint Online, if you, during authentication phase, check that little box that says keep me signed in, and then add the URL to that library to your trusted sites zone in Internet Explorer. That should get you able to view that MOV or MP4 video file. Here's what that dialog looks like. Keep me signed in. You'll need to sign out and then sign in once again if you didn't check that as you're working with your session there. Make sure you're completely closed out of your session. We do have some step-by-step plays that we can share with you at our KB site, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what that looks like. And then adding to the Trusted Sites zone in Internet Explorer, that's depending on the version of IE that you're using, you'll go to your Internet options, you'll click onto your Security tab, choose Trusted Sites, and then add that URL to that site into your Trusted Sites zone. And that should allow you then to play those MOVs or MP4 video files. The KB for that, 3019664. Windows Media Player cannot connect to the server error when you click an MOV or MP4 file in SharePoint Online. And when you go there, that will walk you through the steps of signing out, signing in, and adding your trusted URL. We are pleased that so many of our customers are enjoying this new functionality, Office 365 Video. It is a big hit, and it is essentially YouTube for the enterprise. It's an opportunity to lock down, share, create channels, for the video files that you want to share with your organization. It's relatively new functionality. It hasn't been out for a while, and it is continuing to evolve. And there are a couple of issues that have come up that our customers are facing most commonly. One that has driven some volume and we wanted to talk about today is the case of the missing video channel. You've gone into your video site and you've created a channel, and now you're ready to upload videos to that. Unfortunately, you can't find the channel that you just created. New Office 365 channel isn't listed on the channels page. Did it get created? Will it ever show up? And how long do you expect to wait before that might arrive? Well, first, in case you don't really have any understanding of what I'm talking about, you wanted a little more information about how Office 365 Video works, we've got a great blog out there called Introducing Office 365 Video. It's by Mark Cashman, and at that site you will see an introductory video talking about the functionality of Office 365 Video and some deeper descriptions of that functionality and how things work. So feel free to go out to our blogs.office.com and find out more about video. But now you've created this channel in video and it hasn't shown up yet. What do you got to do? The issue occurs because search in SharePoint Online is a dependency and must first crawl that new channel before you're going to see that channel listed in the channels page. That channels page is the videochannels.aspx page. So give your search crawl some time to index the new channels that you're creating. That time will vary. Do give it at least a few hours, if not a 24-hour period, if you still haven't seen that yet. And hopefully by the time you get back after the search crawl has done its thing, you should see your channels rendering just fine. This is further explained over at our KB number 3020772. New Office 365 video channel isn't listed on the channels page. And with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Rory Leonard so that he can continue with one of the common issues that we see most often working with SharePoint Online, opening with Explorer. Go ahead, Rory.
Thank you, Brian. Let me just make sure you can hear me okay.
You're good.
All right. Okay, so Open with Explorer, Brian mentioned, we'll be discussing next here. Open with Explorer is used to open a Windows Explorer session to SharePoint Online. In this screen capture here, you can see the Open with Explorer button within the SharePoint user interface. Some of the actions you can perform using Open with Explorer include the following. So you can drag documents into libraries, you can create folders, move or copy documents into another library within the same folder, same site collection, or between site collections, or you can delete multiple documents at a time. You can generally perform most of the actions you could when you're working with Explorer in Windows. So maybe you want to check the properties of a file or anything along those lines. So we're going to talk now about just some of the errors or problems you can have when you're using Open with Explorer. The first we'll talk about here is we're having trouble opening this library in File Explorer. Syncing this library will give you a better experience. So as you can see on this screen capture here, it's kind of referencing the OneDrive for Business Sync app. Just be aware that's another option to connect your Windows Explorer with SharePoint Online by using that sync application. In this case, though, let's say we want to continue and use the Open with Explorer functionality for the purpose of this this demo here. Some other error messages you may receive right after clicking that button are: your client does not support opening this list with Windows Explorer, or we're having a problem opening this location in File Explorer. To open this with File Explorer, you'll need to add this to your trusted sites, keep me signed in, and when you sign into your SharePoint site. It does reference a KB article there as well. Note that all of the steps we're running through in this specific issue are available in that KB article and listed. Before I move any further to kind of some of the troubleshooting with Open Explorer, just note the map network drive functionality is very similar to Open Explorer, just because of the fact that we're using Windows Explorer to connect to SharePoint Online. Here you can see map network drive. We're connecting to a, just for example, contoso.sharepoint.com site. The troubleshooting for this Open Explorer is the same as mapping that drive. The first thing you should check if you're running into one of the errors we talked about earlier is you may possibly need a hotfix. This only applies for Internet Explorer 10 with Windows 7 or Windows 8. And first thing you should do is install the hotfix to resolve the problem. The KB is 284-6960 as mentioned there, and the title is Error when you open a SharePoint document library in Windows Explorer or map a network drive to the library after you install IE10. Assuming you've gone through that and you don't have that issue anymore, the next step is to check the Keep Me Signed In checkbox and sign in. You probably saw Brian mention this earlier, and you're going to see some similarities here in this scenario with the ones he mentioned earlier. Before you kind of proceed with this, if you're already signed in, it might be necessary to go ahead and sign out, obviously, just so you can get back to this page. Through any of these steps that we're walking through here, make sure after you've kind of ran through the fix, so in this example we've checked Keep Me Signed In, we've typed our credentials, we've signed in, go ahead and see if the Open with Explorer functionality works. We've kind of started with the most common cause of the issue, and then we're moving forward to the less common scenarios. So as you progress through each step, just make sure to check and see if it's resolved the issue. Next solution here is in Internet Explorer, add trusted sites. Again, we did talk about this a little bit earlier, but you click the gear icon, or depending on your version of IE, you click Tools, you go to Internet Options, you click the Sites button there after selecting the Trusted Sites zone, and then you go ahead and add the domain of your SharePoint site, and then click Add, Close, go back into the site and try it again. Assuming you've ran through all that and you're still getting one of the errors we talked about earlier, so you're getting the try to sync this or referencing the other KB article, the next thing to check is the status of the web client service on your local machine. So the first thing you want to do is, and the quickest way to get to this is go to Start, Run, and then type services.msc. Locate the web client service in the list of services. The first thing you want to do is just check it right away and see there will be a status and see if it's running. Another option is to right-click it and click Properties, which opens the dialog for the web client properties we're seeing on the kind of the right screen capture here on the slide, and confirm the service status is set to running. You do have some options here: start, pause, resume. We're really just concerned that it's running. One thing to note is that if the startup type is set to disabled, you will be unable to start this. In which case you'll have to set it to something like automatic or one of the other available options that does not disable that service. Go ahead and start it. And then after that, go ahead and check and see if Open with Explorer is working. Let's say you are on Windows Server 2008 or Windows Server 2012, and you go to services.msc, and you see that the web client service isn't listed. This is a pretty common scenario, and this actually occurs because the web client service is, the desktop experience is not installed on that machine. So you'll have to go in and actually install that to get this web client service to be available. For all intents and purposes, if you're running Windows 7, Windows 8, anything like that, it should already be there. Moving on, we're going to discuss blocked file types. So anyone that's been with SharePoint Online for a while is probably familiar with the list of blocked file types, but I thought it would be a good mention in this webcast here today. The experience you'll see is kind of similar to what we're seeing here in the screen capture. So the following files have been blocked by the administrator, and then it kind of gives the path. So we're in shared documents, and then this is just a test.json document. we have made quite a few improvements to limit the list of blocked files. So like I said earlier, anyone that's been with SharePoint Online for a while is probably familiar with this list. If you've kind of been watching that, you've seen that they have been kind of dwindling down to just a small subset of file types. And we'll look at those here. Here is pretty much the all-inclusive list of files that we have right now. They are available if you search blocked file types for SharePoint Online on office.com as well, and they were included in the first slide we kind of shared here in the presentation, so feel free to go back and reference that if you want more information about this. It does kind of list the on-premises ones as well, but you want to be concerned with, for this online scenarios, the online files. So the .as, hx, asmx, json, like we saw in the example, .soap, .svc, and .xamlx are the list of block file types. One thing to kind of note, and I don't really have it listed here on the slide, but if you're using, we talked a little bit earlier about the OneDrive for Business Sync app. If you're using that, you will run into the same scenario here. If you drop one of these file types into your local folder that is synced with the OneDrive site, or for example a SharePoint list, depending on how you have it configured, the same experience applies. The message will just be a little different, and it will be presented through the sync application itself rather than on the web page. Next thing we're going to talk about a little bit is access request configuration. So consider some of the different messages you're seeing here. Sorry, the site hasn't been shared with you. Error, access denied. Even some of the messages Brian mentioned earlier in the other access denied scenarios. Again, there's a lot of different things that can cause access denied, but for this we're going to talk about my user receives an access denied, and I want to allow them the ability to actually request access to a resource. This is a pretty common scenario. Maybe someone on your team says, hey, take a look at this spreadsheet. They give you the link, and then they get one of these messages. So looking at how to enable the ability for these users to request access rather than just receiving an access denied message involves first browsing as a user administrator or a user that has the ability to modify permissions at the site collection, clicking the gear icon or the settings icon in the SharePoint up in the upper right, and then clicking Site Settings. Following this, you'll reach the Site Settings page. On this page, the particular menu you're interested in is the Site Permissions, which is in the, you can see there in the Users and Permissions group. Click that, and it will bring you to the Site Permissions page. Anyone that's done a lot of work with the SharePoint Online permissions is probably very familiar with this page. This is just the page where you can go in, you can set any kind of, you can grant permissions, you can add groups, create groups, modify the groups, and all kinds of different permissions for this specific list or site for that matter. But in this case, we're interested in the access request settings, which is highlighted on the screen capture there. Once you click that, you will have the ability to allow access requests. Just kind of taking a look at the highlighted section there, we have allow access requests. We can see it's checked in this scenario. Obviously, to enable it, you just check that box. And then you can see there's the option to provide an email address. What this does is it actually sends notifications to the specified email address that someone has requested access to a resource. If you set up access requests for multiple sites, you can set individual or different email addresses for these. So maybe someone owns one site, you want them to receive notifications, and then another user possibly owns another site and you want them to receive notifications particular to that site. You can specify that as needed. And once someone goes ahead and requests access, they will receive an email message. So go ahead and configure this, click OK. Following this, instead of getting one of those error, access denied or sorry you don't have access, users who go, kind of going back to the scenario, they share a spreadsheet, they go to that, instead of getting one of those messages, they'll get this, let us know why you need access to the site message. Here they can type a message as you see there, so maybe it's just, hey, I'm Bob, I work on the same team, I need access for this content. They don't have to provide a message, and then they can go ahead and send requests. Or actually, I'm sorry, I think they have to provide somewhat of a message and then request access. That message will be part of the email as well as the access requests list. It'll kind of list some of that, and then someone with the ability can go in and approve or deny those requests based on the justification or the need. Next thing we're going to talk about is the Excel survey option. You can see on the screen capture here we're listing the Excel survey. This is something that was added not super recently, but in the past. Excel surveys or surveys allow other people to fill out your list. So maybe something like a sign-up sheet, a questionnaire, a survey, really anything you want to set up there in Excel, and then it allows everyone to see it kind of at one place all at once online. Let's say you're in a scenario where you've got a document library, you go in there, you go ahead, you click new off those simple controls that Brian had discussed earlier, and you don't see the Excel survey option. So here you can see we don't see it. Well, what causes this? Why is the survey missing? There's two things that can cause this survey to go missing, and really in any standard documents type of list. The first thing is external sharing has to be enabled for the affected site collection. Also, file checkout must be disabled for the affected library. So how do I change this? First, we'll talk a little bit about external sharing. In the SharePoint Admin Center, so you're obviously going to want to browse there. The first thing you want to check is locate the affected site collection. So which site collection do you have that doesn't have this Excel survey option? Select the checkbox for the site collection like we're seeing there to the left of that site collection. Click sharing, and then notice the sharing dialog box. In this scenario, we're actually getting a little different message. You can see we don't have the ability to change this. And it's saying sharing is disabled in tenant settings. Before you proceed with modifying any of these settings, you should really have a good understanding of what it means to actually enable this sharing. We do have quite a bit of documentation that talks about it, but really it's just a matter of, do you want to be able to allow external users who accept sharing invitations and sign in as an authenticated user? So maybe someone has a Outlook.com or any other type of email address that's been configured with the Microsoft account. Do you want them to be required to log in using that account to access the resource, which would allow you to kind of keep that permissions locked down to that individual user or set of users, external users? Or do you want to allow both those type of authenticated external users and anonymous guest links? So an anonymous guest link is just a link that shares a resource with someone who does not have to actually authenticate. There is an OAuth token as part of that URL, and that allows them access to that resource. So that's kind of just a quick summary on sharing, but we're going to proceed with kind of the Excel survey. So in this scenario, we're going to assume that we want sharing for this list, and again, sharing is required for the Excel survey option to work. So going back to kind of where we were at here, we're looking at the site collection. We don't have the ability to change these. Well, why is this? You can see here it's disabled in tenant settings. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So here's kind of just, again, the SharePoint Admin Center. Earlier we were looking at the site collections setting. Now we've actually moved down to settings because we need to change a SharePoint Admin Center tenant level setting rather than just modify an individual site collection. Here is kind of the master setting for external sharing organization-wide. There's a couple options here, the same three options we saw earlier. For this scenario and for Excel survey to work, you must allow both external users and anonymous guest links for this survey to function or be available. So go ahead and do this and click OK. And if you think kind of about a survey, and the reason this is required is because surveys are really designed to be anonymous type of surveys, and we want that functionality to be available. So you must configure that option. Once you've done that, you go back to the site collections. Again, select that affected site collection. Click sharing, and you'll notice that you now have the ability to allow both external users who accept sharing invitations and anonymous guest links. We're not getting that message anymore that sharing is disabled at tenant level settings, so we just went and changed that. Select this and go ahead and click Save. One thing to note, after you have modified or made a change to a site collection here in the Site Collections page within the SharePoint Admin Center, you must wait for the update to complete. So I've kind of highlighted the two things which will display that this is happening. First, you'll have the green spinning icon to the right of the site collection, and then kind of up in the top right of the site collections, you'll have the site collection is being updated. Generally, this should take 30 seconds or most often less. Wait for this to complete, and then following that, the survey option will be available. Assuming that you don't have file checkout enabled. So we're going to talk about that now. So how do I check my file checkout or confirm that setting? The first thing you do is you browse to the affected list. So this is the list we were looking at earlier where we did not have that Excel survey option. Let's say in this scenario we've gone in, we've enabled permissions, we've made sure that's all ready to go, but and the external users and that requirement is set, but we still don't have the option. We're going to check the confirm the settings. So we'll go to the Library tab for this list, click Library Settings, like we're seeing here. Again, kind of highlighted on the slide. Within the settings for this library, which is called Documents or Shared Documents, we're going to click Versioning Settings. On the Versioning Settings page, check the Require Checkout setting. Make sure this is set to No for Excel Survey to be available for this library. A couple notes, if you have any content in this library and you would like to continue to require checkout for it, it's probably best practice just to create a new library or shared documents list for Excel surveys exclusively. That way you don't have to modify kind of the file management and some of the different stuff you already have configured for this list. Go ahead and set that to No, and then following the configuration of this and the proper sharing settings, the Excel survey will be available. Moving on to another scenario here, and this is actually the last issue I have to cover right now, is sorry, your session has expired in Office Online. This isn't a super common scenario, but when it does happen, it can be kind of, I guess, frustrating and maybe a little confusing. So maybe you've been working in a list, you've clicked a document, and you just want to view, let's say, example, a Excel document. You click it, you want to view it in Office Online or possibly make some edits, and you get the message here we're seeing in Excel. Sorry, the session is expired. Please refresh the page to continue. Usually in this scenario, at least for this specific root cause, you'll click refresh and nothing happens other than you kind of are prompted with the same message again. In this scenario, the root cause is generally the system date and time, or time zone is incorrect. So maybe you were kind of looking at the calendar, you changed some time there, and you accidentally set the wrong date. That will definitely cause this issue. So it's a nice, easy, kind of quick fix. I just wanted to make sure we were calling that out here, so everyone's aware of that. All right, and that was the last issue I had to cover for today.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I think we'll go ahead and wrap this up today. We appreciate your time.